So if you've seen the movies, you may think you know about the Fantastic Four already. Four people, victims of a scientific accident, who gain incredible superhuman abilities and become a sort of super family, bickering like siblings, but always hanging together when it really counts. The Fantastic Four and their incredibly colorful adventures launched the Marvel Universe in its modern form and changed not only comic books, but the larger popular culture in ways that we don't yet fully appreciate. And if you're a casual comic book fan, you may think you know the story behind the story of their creation, because the story of the Fantastic Four is one with several layers. But what you may not know is the secret horror connection behind the creation of the world's greatest comic magazine. I'm Tony Frazier, author, blogger, near genius, and this is a special Halloween edition of Hero Go Home Presents Fantastic Four, The Terrifying Secret. If you're at all familiar with Marvel Comics or with superhero films from the last 10 years, you're probably at least a little familiar with the Fantastic Four, Marvel's so-called first family. Scientist Reed Richards, his girlfriend and later wife, Sue Storm, Sue's younger brother Johnny, and pilot Ben Grimm, who received superhuman powers from a storm of cosmic radiation during an experimental spaceflight. Their colorful adventures, originally produced by writer Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby, launched the modern Marvel Universe, partially inspired Pixar's The Incredibles, and have been adapted into a number of media, including feature films, Saturday morning cartoons, and even a radio drama featuring a young Bill Murray as the voice of the Human Torch. In his 1974 book, Origins of Marvel Comics, Stan Lee tells the tale of the start of the Marvel Age something like this. Timely Comics publisher Martin Goodman called him into his office and said that DC Comics had been experiencing success with reviving some of their old superheroes and teaming them up in a book called Justice League of America. Goodman tasked Lee with coming up with their own Justice League to compete with it, shades of Superman and Captain Marvel. The late Jack Kirby, on the other hand, claimed that he had come up with the idea himself and that he did all the plotting and that Stan Lee only ever came up with the final dialogue. Kirby claimed that he based the team on a similar team he had introduced earlier at DC Comics, a non-superpowered group known as the Challengers of the Unknown. Like the Fantastic Four, they made the decision to become a team of adventurers after a crash landing. Like the Fantastic Four, they fought strange scientific menaces, aliens from other planets or experiments gone awry, and perhaps most compelling, one story published 3 years before the publication of Fantastic Four #1 features a member of the team landing after a spaceflight with strange powers, including the ability to shoot fire from his hands and to camouflage himself so he appears invisible. Now, nothing about this sounds particularly horrifying, so what do I mean when I talk about the Fantastic Four's horror connection? Well, let's start off by looking at the team's origin story as presented in Fantastic Four #1, cover dated November 1961. Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben are set to take off in an experimental spacecraft. Ben worries about the effects of cosmic radiation. Reed assures him that it will be safe, but while on the flight, the ship is hit by a cosmic storm and crashes back to Earth. As the group argue among themselves, they begin to change form. Johnny bursts into flames, Sue turns invisible, Ben turns into an orange super-strong monster, and Reed's limbs stretch like rubber. The team then faces their first challenge in the person of the Mole Man, who lives underground and commands an army of hideous subterranean monsters. One thing to understand when examining the Fantastic Four's horror roots is the context of the moment. For that initial context, you need look no further than Stan Lee's book Origins of Marvel Comics once again, because as Stan Lee describes, before they launched the Marvel Universe, the company had been concentrating almost exclusively on monster comics, featuring monsters like Gratu, Rambu, and Fin Fang Foom. So in a sense, the first issue of Fantastic Four looks largely like an exercise in bet hedging. Not only does the first issue feature the four heroes battling monsters, but the cover centers on a giant monster with the four heroes on the periphery. So even though this is ostensibly the first issue in a new superhero series, it doesn't really look or read all that differently from the kinds of monster books Marvel had been doing for a while. If it didn't work out, Marvel could continue doing the same types of books it had been doing without a hiccup. What's more, even the heroes themselves are rather grotesque and based mostly on other characters. Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, can stretch himself into grotesque shapes and is based on both the Golden Age Plastic Man and DC's Elongated Man, introduced the year before. Sue Storm, the Invisible Girl, is obviously based on the Invisible Man from the classic H.G. Wells novel, and the 1933 monster movie. The Human Torch is not based on a classic monster, but he's a guy who's on freaking fire. He was based on the Golden Age Human Torch featured on the cover of Marvel Comics #1, which gave Marvel its name. And then there's the Thing, a man transformed into a super strong monster with rock-like skin who has similarities with lots of different characters but who has no specific precursor. Or does he? I'll circle back to him in a bit. Note also that Marvel continued this pattern of heroes who were also monsters with their next few characters. There was Ant-Man, with similarities to both DC's Atom and to the Incredible Shrinking Man, with the added weirdness that he could talk to ants. There was the Hulk, explicitly based on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There was a guy with the abilities of a spider, and a reborn Norse god who, while not being monstrous himself, fought the monstrous stone men from Saturn in his first adventure. There was a guy who looked like a scary robot, and a wizard who battled other dimensional monsters. The entire early Marvel universe seemed to have horror, or the Comics Code-approved equivalent of horror, baked into its bones. But now is where we leave the realm of fact and enter the realm of total speculation. Please note that I have no evidence for the theory I'm about to present, just an appreciation of the coincidence. Remember when I said that there was no specific precursor to the Thing? That may not be entirely true. In 1959, 2 years before the first issue of Fantastic Four was published, a low-budget horror film titled First Man into Space was released. See if this story sounds at all familiar. Researchers are sending up test flights of an experimental spacecraft. The pilot, experiencing a kind of reverse rapture of the deep, pushes the craft higher than it's supposed to go and encounters a storm of cosmic radiation. The ship crashes back to Earth, and soon the countryside is being terrorized by a strange, man-like monster with rocky skin. It turns out that the monster is the test pilot, whose body has been mutated and who is experiencing horrible agony because he can barely breathe. Men who turn into monsters through scientific misadventure is a common trope in popular culture, going all the way back at least to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Creatures made of moving, living stone are less common. Finding a character who shares both traits, and who displays his condition immediately after returning from a spaceflight, even if they name-check meteor dust instead of cosmic rays as the reason, seems almost too coincidental. Like I said before, though, there's absolutely no evidence I can find that either Stan Lee or Jack Kirby ever even saw First Man into Space, let alone found even unconscious inspiration from it. And as I mentioned before, there is a Kirby Challengers of the Unknown story that also bears a strong resemblance to the FF's origin story, so you can put exactly as much credence into this idea as you paid for this video. I just think it's an entertaining idea, and it fits well into the general horror milieu surrounding the rest of the origin. And that's it for me. I know this was a shorter video than I've been making, but they can't all be epics. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, feel free to hit the like button and please pass it on to your friends. If you would like to see more, hit the subscribe button. For more commentary on films and comic books, visit my site at HeroGoHome.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at TonyFraser1. I'll be back next week with another Halloween-themed video. I'm Tony Fraser, and thanks for watching.